All right, the return of sports, the return of the NBA. Let's get some help. Our buddy Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated, NBC Sports Boston, joining us on the Volkswagen Dealers Expert Hotline. Chris, if it takes all this trouble, a 16-page memo, and all of this back and forth to get 4 guys into a gym just to shoot jump shots, does that tell you how far away we are from NBA basketball actually returning to the floor?
Well, that wasn't exactly my reaction to it, because I don't think that these guys potentially getting a handful of them into a gym has really anything to do with the NBA returning. I think the NBA has some kind of timeline in their head where they're going to make a decision. They're really not going to think about – they're not going to look too deep into the numbers until they get to that date, whether it's May 15th or even June 1st, whenever they decide. What jumped to mind when this happened to me, Mike, was that this has the ability of making the playoffs completely uncredible, lacking credibility in any way. Because if you're going to allow players to get back into gyms in some cities and other players can't get into gym in others, that creates an unfair competitive advantage. I mean, right. even if guys are just doing one-on-one stuff and using the weight room, that's more than what most players are doing. They're simply not even doing – I mean, you hear these stories about players like Jason Tatum and others who haven't even picked up a basketball in that period of time. So, look, if the NBA goes forward with this and opens up facilities to players, I think they have to say, whatever happens with a postseason that we decide to do, it does not crown a legitimate champion. The 2020 NBA championship will be vacant. Did
you have a thought there, Mazz? I heard you chime in.
Well, so look, again, that was one of the first things that occurred to me when I saw that some teams would be allowed back depending on what the restrictions were, or the lifting of restrictions in their cities, and other teams wouldn't. But then I also read, Chris, that the NBA would be in touch with players and organizations who weren't in cities where the restrictions were lifted, and come up with some sort of alternative solution. So don't you think the NBA is aware of that inconsistency?
Oh, they're very aware of it. And every time I speak to somebody at a high level about, exactly that kind of, sort of ambiguous phrase that you used and that was out there in stories about finding ways to kind of accommodate them, nobody has any specific way of explaining it. There's just no way of, basically packing up the Lakers for 3 weeks and taking them to Texas to do it. Like, players don't want to do it. They've got families. They don't want to be traveling during times like this. They want to work out at their own facilities. And you can't do that with, 20 of the 30 teams in the league. Or even if you want to limit the playoff teams, you can't do it with, half the playoff teams that are in the league. It's a nice thought, Mazz, that the NBA has about doing something like that. But I've been on the phone all week, and nobody has even presented one type of credible way of doing it. And every time I talk to general managers, they laugh at the idea. It's just not possible to do it unless every team opens their facility. By the way, I have no problem with these facilities being open in states that have loosened their restrictions, because, look, these guys are athletes. They're basketball players. If it's not at their team facility, they're going to a damn Equinox. They're going to find a place to work out. And they might as well be working out at a sanitized facility as opposed to 24-hour fitness where they might catch something.
And I think, I mean, with all respect to the health and safety of everyone, we are in a place where they should be allowed to go to I was going to say Warrior or the Red Auerbach Center there and open up the gym and have it 4 guys shooting around there. I know there's stay-at-home orders, and the whole thing was extended today by Charlie Baker. I'm sorry. It shouldn't be so tight that Jason Tatum can't go to the gym and shoot baskets. I think it's silly.
And, Mike, you mean regardless of restrictions?
Right, right.
Yeah, I agree.
There should be an exception granted, or with that level of openness, that level of activity, I'm sorry. After Tatum's been quarantined for now, 6 weeks? And the team has been quarantined for 6 weeks, and we've got a little better grip on this. And our hospitals, thank God, knock on wood at this point, are not overrun. And, I'm not saying open up but can the guy go shoot baskets in the gym? I think it's a little silly that he can't. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I completely agree at this point. I mean, when we had this conversation a few weeks ago, I agreed with the idea of shutting everything down because we didn't know the direction that this virus was going. We didn't know how bad it was going to get. At that time, you've got Navy medical ships, cruising up the Hudson at that point. You have to shut things down. But now that there seems to at least be a light at the end of the tunnel somewhere, of course you continue doing all the things the medical experts tell you to do. But these facilities are palaces. You can say Marcus Smart can come in for 2 hours here, Jason Tatum for 2 hours there. Open up the gym for all 12, 13 of your guys at separate times so they can get some work in. I think it might be too cautious right now to keep these types of facilities closed.
Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated, joining us quickly. I had read somewhere the Vegas mayor, now maybe on the other side of the equation, the Vegas mayor is like, woo, let's go. Slots are open. But I had heard that opening up Vegas actually might scare the NBA away because it won't be as safe as it is now as they shut down, single location. And then I heard, was it Washburn or someone wrote about they had talked to Disney World about maybe going to freaking Disney World and using that as their central location. So just your thoughts on, the location now.
Well, I mean, look, they've had more than a dozen cities, locations, pitch them these bubble-like concepts, these quarantine concepts. I've told you consistently, and I continue to hear this, that Vegas continues to be the front runner in that type of discussion just because of the logistical issues that they have kind of figured out in a city like that because of their recent history there. Carolyn Goodman, the mayor of Las Vegas, is bonkers, but it's fair to say that, you have to understand, she can't open as much as a food court on the Strip. Like, she has no power whatsoever over the casinos and most of the popular areas of Las Vegas. The Strip itself is part of a detached version of Clark County. She has no authority over it whatsoever. So the NBA sees stuff like that, and the people I've talked to have rolled their eyes to it, but it doesn't really impact them. If Vegas and if the governor says, look, we're open for certain amounts of business, if medical experts say that, that's when the NBA moves, not when, Carolyn Goodman, who, if you know the history of the Goodman family, her and her husband have been the mayor of that town for like 3 decades. It's a wacky, wacky story, but they're not doing anything because she says so.
Chris, I know they already said they're giving it back, but I'm sure you can understand why small business owners are pissed to hear the Lakers even applied for one of those PPP loans in the first place. So how's it been viewed around the league that they even got that close to $5 million?
Incredulously at this point. That day, I guess on some level you could understand if, like, the Memphis Grizzlies did. I still wouldn't understand that, but because these NBA teams, the way they organized the collective bargaining agreement the last time around, it basically made them idiot-proof. Like, you have to make money if you're an NBA opener. But to see the Lakers, who are either the most valuable franchise in the NBA or the second most valuable, apply for less money than they're paying like the 15th man on the roster right now, that kind of loan from the government. I haven't heard enough about who did it and why they did it, but the idea that they would think that's a justifiable thing to do is just ludicrous to me.
Okay. Oh, Chris, please, it's embarrassing. I'd be embarrassed if I were the Lakers, frankly. That aside, I just quickly, in your discussions with teams, have you gotten any better understanding or idea as to where things stand with testing for those teams? And are teams at all giving you any indication that they're surprised they're not closer to it or that they're not here already?
Well, they're as surprised as the rest of us as to where we are and how far we are away. One thing to be clear about is that NBA teams, look, they wouldn't have any problem paying for private testing. Like, they have no issue with it, putting up the money that's needed to do something like that. The problem is more perception, right? They can't, be out there, administering 10,000 tests to their players over the course of a 6-week span while people in, impoverished neighborhoods or tougher parts of the country are still desperately looking for testing. It's more about the visual than it is the actual testing. Look, half the teams that got tested used private laboratories. You saw the Nets did it. I think the Lakers did it. A bunch of teams have used those private labs. That stuff is a possibility, even a probability for the NBA to use once this comes back. They just need testing to become, as I watched the governor of New York, they need to have it in CVS's. They need to have everybody able to walk into a location and get a cheap test before they can go out there and just spend all their money on other ones.
Chris, did Tatum get his rim yet? Did he get his hoop set up yet?
I haven't checked recently, but I certainly hope so at this point, Mike. It's starting to get warm out. You can those things you can buy on Amazon. Set one of those cheap ones up and go.
Okay,
I have a little news for you on that one.
Well, yes, I was just going to say, Mazz, we're going to pick that up on the other side. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time. We really do appreciate it.